Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to this FUELPHORIA webinar on gender and the green transition. Today, we'll discuss a topic that many of us have encountered both in our professional work and in everyday life: how gender perspectives influence research, innovation, and transition to a more sustainable future. Before we begin, let me briefly walk with you through the agenda for today's webinar and introduce you to our speakers. We will start with a short introduction where I will present the FUELPHORIA project and discuss why gender is relevant for Horizon projects and the green transition. Then we will hear from Jade Gefrate from the European Commission, who will present the European policy framework and key figures related to gender equality in research and innovation. Next, Stamatia Antonakoudi from Draxis will introduce the social LCA methodology and share lessons learned from previous projects on integrating social and gender considerations in research. Then we will move to regional perspectives from Africa. Hindal Hildu from the American University of Cairo will discuss gender, energy, and structural inequalities in Africa, focusing on the case of Egypt. This will then be followed by Lisa Kituto from the Technical University of Mombasa, Kenya, who will present perspectives on gendering the green transition in Africa, highlighting challenges and future opportunities. Finally, Johannes Constas from Kuplan will present best practices from the W4RES Project on promoting women's leadership in the renewable energy sector. At the end of the session, the speakers will be happy to respond to any questions that you may have. So attendees, please note that attendees are in listen-only mode, so send us your questions via the chat. This webinar is being recorded. The recording and the slides will be made available on the FUELPHORIA website. Before moving to the topic itself, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Vasika Perneka. I study chemical engineering and I'm currently pursuing an MBA in project management. I work as a research associate at the Center for Research and Technology Hellas in Greece, where I participate in Horizon Europe projects related to the green transition, fuels, renewable fuels, and sustainable energy technologies. Now, to understand why this topic is important, let us first look at why gender matters in the context of the green transition. The green transition refers to the global shift towards cleaner and more sustainable energy systems, aiming to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and move towards renewable energy sources. However, research and global statistics show that climate change and energy crisis do not affect everyone in the same way. Women often face greater vulnerability due to existing social and economic inequalities. For example, women still earn on average 30% less than men in the European Union, and they also carry a larger share of unpaid care and household chores. These inequalities can increase the risk of poverty and energy insecurity. In fact, it's estimated that almost 160 million more women could fall into poverty by 2050 due to climate change. In many parts of the world, women are also more directly exposed to energy challenges. For example, less than 1% of households in sub-Saharan countries use modern cooking fuels, which often affects women the most due to their role in household energy use. At the same time, women remain underrepresented in energy and STEM sectors, meaning that their perspectives are often missing from the design of energy technologies and policies. These examples show why considering gender perspectives is important when designing policies, technologies, and research projects related to the green transition. Because of these challenges, gender equality has become an important priority within European research policy. Horizon Europe is the European Union's main funding program for research and innovation, supporting projects that address major societal challenges and promote sustainable and inclusive development. Gender equality is a central priority of Horizon Europe. Projects must integrate gender dimension, as it is now a mandatory requirement in all research and innovation projects across Horizon Europe. Projects should also aim to have an even 50-50 participation rate of both men and women amongst teams and in leading roles. Institutions participating in Horizon Europe are also required to implement gender equality plans, which aim to promote equal opportunities and leadership for women in research and innovation. In the following presentation, Jane will provide more detailed insights into this. Now I'll do a short presentation of the FUELPHORIA project. FUELPHORIA is a Horizon Europe project coordinated by CERT that focuses on developing innovative processes to convert CO2 and organic waste into alternative fuels for transport and energy applications. The project involves 26 partners from Europe and Africa and is currently at the midpoint of its implementation. Beyond technological innovation, the project also integrates environmental and social considerations, including the gender dimension. However, gender imbalance is still observed in many research projects. In our project as well, we see lower participation of women, especially in the general assemblies and in key leadership and decision-making roles. Recognizing these imbalances allow us to take steps towards improving participation and representation, both in this project and in future ones. Now, in line with Horizon Europe requirements, FUELPHORIA has committed in its grant agreement to several actions. These include promoting equal participation in the project, integrating gender considerations in research and innovation activities, avoiding gender bias in communication and dissemination, and encouraging women's leadership in scientific roles. This brings us to the broader relevance of today's webinar. Energy technologies shape many aspects of our everyday lives, from mobility and housing to access to energy services. At the same time, gender can influence how people experience energy and climate-related challenges, and women remain underrepresented in many areas of energy research and innovation. Considering gender perspectives in research can therefore lead to more inclusive, effective, and widely accepted solutions, and ultimately contribute to a fair and successful green transition. Through this webinar, we aim to exchange knowledge and practical experiences, connect policy research and real-world perspectives, learn from both European and African contexts, and reflect on how gender considerations can be better integrated into Horizon projects and research initiatives. So as a final thought, we should all keep in mind that the green transition is not only about developing new technologies, but also about who designs them, who benefits from them, and who is included in shaping them. So thank you for your attention. I will now give the floor to Jade Yafrate. Jade is a policy officer for gender equality at Directorate General for Research and Innovation in the European Commission. Her work focuses on advancing this policy agenda under the European research area and also on gender equality provisions under Horizon Europe. So, Jade, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Basia, and many thanks for the invitation to this webinar. I hope you can all see my screen in full screen mode and that everything is working. Vasia, could you just confirm to me?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So good morning, everyone. And again, as I was saying, I'm very delighted to participate to this webinar, as it's a very important topic, and as of course it's fully aligned with what we are designing and working on at the European Commission. So as mentioned, my name is Jadia Frat. I am a policy officer working for the Directorate General of Research Innovation at the European Commission, and my work is directly linked to gender equality in research innovation. So to tell you a bit more maybe about the general background, so why gender equality is at the cornerstone of our policies, it is because it is linked directly to the treaties of the European Union, where we ensure that equality should prevail in all the policies and action of the European Union. In particular, under the previous European Commission mandate, we have adopted for the first time sex equality strategy with an intersectional view. And now, currently, the Commission is working towards updating these strategies and announcing their follow-up for the next for this mandate. So, for example, in these strategies, you have the gender equality strategy, where now we just adopted the new gender equality strategy in this March, so actually last week, that will design the framework for 2030. Sorry. We have also the EU anti-racism action plan that also became a strategy now for this mandate, and also to just name few, LGBTIQ strategy, and also the strategy for the right of person with disabilities. All of that are really setting the frame towards what the European Commission see as priority in those fields, and what commitment they want to develop across the policies developed by the European Commission. In gender, in research innovation, sorry, it is also something that is a cross-cutting priority. In particular, gender equality, but also gender mainstreaming in research innovation is a policy priority since already more than 10 years. And it was already affirmed in one of the communication that the Commission published in 10 years ago, to really state that now we will be committing to promote gender equality. Currently, you have like already like a sort of compass that was also presented last year with the adoption of the EU roadmap for women's rights, that also strengthened the point that we're going to touch upon during this meeting, which is the importance of gender sensitive research and the call for research innovation to really close the gap in knowledge and in addressing women's needs. So we are really going towards a greater commitment. But first, I want to take you to also echo what Vasya was mentioning before. I want to explain to you what are the three, let's say, tools that we have under Horizon Europe. So Horizon Europe is the funding program for research innovation that is led by the EU, and we have like three criteria that help us to really ensure our policies in gender equality. In particular, the first one is the gender equality plan. So it's an eligibility criterion for public bodies, research organization, higher education establishment from member states and also associated country to the Horizon Europe program. So this means that if your organization is one of these like under those categories, you will be requested to do a self-declaration to present a gender equality plan in your organization. So it's really here we address, let's say, like the structural change that are also needed to contribute to gender equality. The second tool, and it's the one that I will be more extensive about during this presentation, is really the integration of the gender dimension in research innovation content. In Horizon Europe, it's mandatory by default unless the topic specifies something different in the topic description, and it's something that we assess under an award criterion. But again, I will explain more in my next slides. The last criteria that really is at the core of this policy is the gender balance. And now with this new work program, we are talking about gender balance among researchers in leading position, which can become a ranking criteria in case of ex aequo proposal. So I also want to precise that any researcher belonging to a project in Horizon Europe can declare their gender along three categories: woman, man, and non-binary. Maybe already to show you a bit of the positive result that we had with Horizon Europe, and that we can already measure through the period, like the midterm, let's say, evaluation of Horizon Europe, is that those policies really contributed to have a greater gender balance. In particular, as you might see here in this table, I'm comparing Horizon 2020 with Horizon Europe, so the previous framework program with the current one. And for example, you can see that women coordinator in Horizon Europe used to be 24% of women are represented, 24% in Horizon Europe, in Horizon 2020, sorry, and now it's 31% in Horizon Europe. I'm also adding in this slide like the table regarding the SHE figures. So SHE figures is our analysis that we are publishing every 3 years to compare the data and the representation of women in research innovation. It really follow and track the journey of a woman evolving in a career in this field. And as you can see, like women still are underrepresented, for example, in highest academic position. They represent only at EU level 30%, and they are still also underrepresented as author of publication, where they represent 34%. So these are a bit like also to balance the picture and to show how Horizon Europe is also trying to make those progress really happen by structural policies, and really highlight Horizon Europe as leading in this field, as showing the way to also really contribute to these changes that are much needed. Now I'm going to focus more on the integration of the gender dimension in research innovation content, since it is why also we are gathered here today. And in first place, I would like to start with a reminder. So what do we mean by that? It's really this umbrella term to refer to the integration of sex analysis and or gender analysis into R&I content and design. So, as a reminder, sex really refers to biological attribute, while gender is going to refer to sociocultural norm, identities, and relation. And when we use intersectionality, is like how actually sex and gender can interact with other factors such as racial or ethnic origin, age, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, or disability. And all of that is something that we define under Horizon Europe as necessary to guarantee the excellence of the project. In particular, I just want to to raise your attention on the fact that under Horizon Europe, you have actually like when you're applying, there is a specific box actually where you have to explain um, how do you intend to integrate the gender dimension in your work. And with a first pre-check, we have noticed that sometimes it happened that the gender and the integration of the gender dimension is confused with, for example, gender balance in research team. So we have proposal, for example, that gonna rather highlight the fact that there is balance between women and men in their research teams. So this is how the integration of the gender dimension is being pursued. And also something else that we see is that, for example, a proposal will rather highlight um, general consideration on gender equality. So the European Union, because of the treaty, is committed to gender equality, so in our project we will also do so. But it's really not what he's looking for there. What he's looking for is really to understand how in your project you are taking into account sex, gender, and intersecting factor from the design to the delivery of your project. And for us, it is really important because today it is assessed that there is only 2% of the EU publication, not the EU, sorry, at the EU level of the publication that take into account a gender dimension. So as you can see, my slide is written 98, so meaning 98 that are gender blind, so meaning 2% only that consider. And this is based on our Schiffegger's report that is taking a look at the Scopus database to be able to deliver this statistic. So it is important because actually, if you address the diverse need of EU citizens, but also Horizon Europe is open to the world, so it's not only EU citizen. It's like if you address the needs of everyone, you will guarantee that the project being delivered are actually also accessible to everyone and being used by everyone. And I just wanted to give you some example because I found them quite striking. But for example, like if we wonder why is it so important to consider the gender dimension, you might start with those considerations. So, for example, did you know that women are twice as likely to die after a heart attack than a man, particularly because of postmenopausal um, condition, for example? Or did you know that by 2050, since your project is also connected to green transition, so by 2050, daily water collection times for women without household access could increase by 30% globally and up to 100% regionally. So what we mean by that is that there is like always in a way biological condition, so when we refer to sex, but also gender role aspect that can be considered as a part of the research and can influence actually your results and the conclusion that you might have in the design of of your research proposal or of your research content. In Horizon Europe, as I was saying, so there is this criterion, and I just wanted to explain to you how do we implement it and how do we monitor it, because I think it's also interesting. So as I was referring before, it's a no word criterion, so it's mandatory unless the topic description explicitly include a derogation, and it is assessed under excellence for research and innovation action. So it's different part of Horizon Europe. And if you're applying to Horizon Europe, or if you have a project, you will probably this will echoes your knowledge on that. But you have different type of research funding, and particularly this criterion is only requested under research innovation action, and co-fund. In terms of implementation and enforcement, at the proposal stage, applicants are invited to describe, as I was mentioning before, the gender dimension in their project, so explaining how they want to take into account this gender dimension. Then it is also still evaluated, of course, as I was saying, once the evaluator are actually attributing grade and score to the projects, they will take this into account under the excellence criterion. And then at the reporting stage, so once the project is selected and start, we have reviewers that are checking and verifying if this gender integration and gender dimension is taken into account and is implemented effectively. On our side, also in terms of monitoring, we have a study that was published for the midterm of Horizon Europe to really assess the progress in gender equality. And for example, we can see that in Horizon 2020, only 23% of projects declared they took the gender dimension into account, because before it used to be done on voluntary base. And now with this new integration, we can see that 80.5% of topic do not include a derogation, and therefore require funded project to integrate a gender dimension into their content. We are also on our side working on a public procurement where we hope to deliver by next year a new study to really assess the integration and the effectiveness of the gender dimension in Horizon Europe funded projects. Also, this part of the reporting is actually something that is done at EU level, and I found that maybe it will be something you also would like to know more about. So we do a tracking of gender-related expenditure in the EU budget at large. It is something that is done through a program performance statement. So in Horizon Europe, we actually have a look at this integration of the gender dimension. But if you go on the website of the Commission, you can find the tracking of expenditure in gender equality for all EU funding. And actually, I also want to say that in the framework of the next MFF, so the next multi-financial framework, we would like to strengthen actually this tracking, and it's also something that is a part of the new gender equality strategy. In Horizon Europe, the way the methodology was designed to actually comment on this on this tracking of expenditure was done by 3 scores. So score 2, principal objective, are connected to gender equality. Score 1, it's still a significant objective, so it take it into account. And score 0, it doesn't take it into account. There is no contribution. And just to show you, we are assessing that there is 49.1 billion of expenditure for the from the work program 2021 to 2024 that directly contributed to gender equality. In Horizon Europe, we have a sort of like specific score that is score 0 stars, because there is still some project that even if they still don't mention maybe directly how they're going to contribute to gender equality, since there is this mandatory integration, they still need to report. They have a reporting obligation regarding this. So we have also this might score, let's say. And then I just wanted to give a couple advice, because I think it will be aligned with also the next presentation. But how to ensure this integration is really to think about like your data collection, for example. So when you are designing like the methodology, the questionnaire, the survey, the focus group, really try to think about how this could potentially highlight sex and or gender differences, and how you can include it in your proposal or in your deliverables. Also, in the proposal of your field, have you checked like the existence of literature on sex and gender analysis? Have you considered how gender and interconnected social categories can actually enter into question or into the outcome of that you would like to bring with your project? And also like do you, like, as a part of your project, either gender norms or assumption that could influence greatly the area you are working on? I think today meeting is really important because we're going to focus on a specific area and really show how actually gender differences matter in this area and how it can be greater influence. And these are rather like more broader consideration that can help any researcher that wish to really integrate that aspect in their work. I also want to say that so you will have the slide later, as the organizer just mentioned. So I have added like a series of resources that you might find interesting. In particular, I want to highlight that we have a dedicated European research area subgroup, so with member states and associated countries being involved on strengthening gender equality. And they have come up last year with this framework from the integration and evaluation of inclusive gender analysis in research content. So you might also want to have a look at that. And here is also our latest publication, and that will be mainly it for me. So if you have question afterward, like I will be pleased to answer to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ait. Next, we will move to the methodological perspective presented by Stamatia Antonakoudi. Stamatia is a civil engineer with a master's degree in sanitary engineering, specializing in solid waste and wastewater management. She is a project manager and team member at Reven, working on European research and innovation projects focusing on circular economy and sustainability assessment, with particular expertise in life cycle assessment. So, Stamatia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vasya, and thank you again for this invitation. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
You can? Okay.
We can.
Why I can't see mine? Okay. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for your participation in today's webinar. It's particularly meaningful that this discussion takes place just a few days after International Women's Day. Today I will present how social life cycle assessment can be used as a methodological tool to identify gender-related dynamics in green transition. In this presentation, I will introduce what is social life cycle assessment, how its methodology works, how gender considerations are integrated into the social life cycle assessment framework within the FUELPHORIA project, and finally, some lessons learned from previous EU research project. So before moving into the presentation, I would like to introduce the organization I represent, which is Dreven. Dreven is a research organization dedicated to environmental sustainability and innovation. It was founded in 2021 as a spin-out company of Draxis Environmental, building on more than 20 years of experience. So, driven expertise spanning several domains such as circular economy, climate resilience, air quality monitoring, and many more. Across these, we frequently apply sustainability assessment methodologies. Particularly, we got involved in 16 projects implementing the life cycle assessment approaches. Within the FUELPHORIA project, Dreven leads the work package responsible for life cycle assessment activities. The main objective of these tasks are to assess the environmental, costing, and social life cycle performance of the value chains which are developed in FUELPHORIA for advanced biofuels and renewable fuels of non-biological origin that we call them RFNBOs. Okay. So while environmental LCA is the most widely known application, Today, I will focus on social dimension of life cycle assessment known as social LCA. Now, what is exactly the social LCA? It is a methodology designed to evaluate social impacts associated with products, services, or technologies across their life cycle. It examines how these activities within a value chain affect people and different stakeholders. It combines quantitative and qualitative information and provides structured evidence on social and socioeconomic conditions. This information can support decision making and improving social performance and stakeholders' well-being. Having introduced the social LCA framework in general terms, I will present how this methodology is applied within the FUELPHORIA project to assess the social impact for value chains of advanced biofuels and renewable fuels of non-biological origin. To apply social LCA within the FUELPHORIA project, we follow the standard methodological framework based on ISO 14040 and 40044 and UNEP guidelines. The process begin with a goal and scope definition, where we define the system boundaries, identify the relevant stakeholders, and select the social indicators that will be assessed. The next step is the social life cycle inventory, which involves collecting both primary and secondary data related to the social condition within the value chains. This information is then evaluated during the social impact assessment phase, where the indicators are analyzed using a reference scale approach. Finally, during the interpretation phase, we analyze the results in order to identify key social insights and draw conclusions regarding the social performance of all these value chains, as well as potential recommendation. At the core of this analysis, a critical element is the identification of the different stakeholders groups affected along the value chains. According to the UNEP social LCA guidelines, the main stakeholder categories include workers, local community, society, consumers, and value chains across. Social LCA allow us to analyze how different stakeholders groups may be affected across the value chains for advanced biofuels and RFNBOs, which are developed in the FUELPHORIA project. The methodology links each stakeholder category to specific social impact subcategories and corresponding indicators. Gender-related impact can emerge across several of these stakeholder groups, like local community, society, consumers, etc. This example illustrates how this structure works in practice. For the stakeholder groups, workers, for the stakeholder group workers, one relevant impact subcategory is health and safety. This can be assessed through indicators such as accessibility to health and healthcare and water, the number of occupational accidents and disease, and exposure to toxic chemicals. Now, I will explain and give about the stakeholder group. Refers to workers that are involved in the production of biofuels and RFNBOs. The gender-related impacts for workers are typically analyzed through impact categories such as equal opportunities and non-discrimination, fair salary, working hours, and training and access to training and education. For example, under equal opportunities, we examine whether employment practices ensure fair treatment regardless of gender, including hiring and promotion processes. Indicators such as the ratio of female to male employees or the percentage of women in managerial position can provide insights into gender participation within the sector. Similarly, the fair salary category allow us to assess potential gender wage gaps, taking into consideration the gender wage, this percentage indicative indicator. Other indicators may capture differences in working hours or employment patterns, as well as women participation in training and professional development programs gap. Through this indicator, social LCA helps identify potential inequalities or barriers affecting women in emerging energy sector. Gender impact can also emerge at the level of a consumer of biofuels and RFNBOs. One important impact category is fair price, which relates to the affordability of fuels or transport services. Changes in fuel market or energy system may influence fuel prices or sometimes transport costs, which in turn affect households differently. Due to existing gender income gaps, women may sometimes experience a higher economic burden related to energy cost. Another relevant category concerns transparency and feedback mechanism. This refers to whether different social groups have access to information and participation opportunities in energy transition processes. Indicators may therefore examine aspects such as access to fuel price information or participation in a consultation process analyzed by gender. Finally, gender impacts can also be examined at the level of society as a whole. Here, social LCA considers broader socioeconomic effects related to the development of new fuel market. For instance, the impact category contribution to economy development examines how new advanced biofuels and renewable fuel of non-biological origin may influence regional economic conditions. Now, changes in the fuel prices, employment opportunities, or energy infrastructure can affect household welfare, sometimes differently across the gender groups. Indicators such as the poverty rate by gender or changes in fuel cost relative to income can provide insights to those broader social dynamics. Another category concerns consumers' health and safety, since changes in fuel system may affect exposure to air pollution or safety risk associated with fuel handling on transport. This impact may also vary depending on gender roles, mobility patterns, or household responsibility. At this point, I would like to highlight the core position of our contribution. Our work does not aim to debate the importance of gender equality as a gender principle. Instead, it demonstrates that without integrated, general, aware social life cycle assessment, the social dimension of advanced biofuels and RFNBOs production may remain only partially understood. Our focus is therefore on methodology and structure assessment, showing how social LCA can systematically reveal gender-related dynamics across technology value chains. So now, based on experience from previous European research project applying social LCA, several insights emerged regarding the gender dimension. First, technological systems are not always gender neutral. Certain activities along value chains, such as feedstock cultivation or biomass handling, may be unintentionally influence participation partners before women and men. Second, gender-related impacts may appear at different points of the value chains and across several stakeholder groups, including workers, value chain actors, and local community. Also, social helps provide structure insight into the social condition by analyzing stakeholder groups and indicators. The methodology makes it impossible to identify where participation gaps or unequal conditions may occur. Finally, gender outcomes are often influenced by broader socioeconomic frameworks such as a labor market structure, education access, and national equality policies. This observation highlights that the technological innovation alone does not automatically lead to socially inclusive outcomes. In fact, many sustainability studies suggest that energy transition are often analyzed as technological transformation, while in reality, there are also social transition. In sustainability assessment, we measure environmental impact with great precision. But what if gender was treated like carbon dioxide? Social LCA offers a framework to examine this dimension with the same methodological rigor, because women's participation in the world of work is not only a question of representation, but it's a driver of innovation, development, and changes. The painting Allegory of Inclination by Artemisia Gentileschi is a particularly a symbolic piece of art, as it was created by a woman artist who managed to distinguish herself at a time when women had very limited opportunities in the field of art. So, thank you for your attention, and I would like to point up that events like this webinar play an important role in raising awareness and encouraging dialogue on how gender consideration can be integrated into research technology, development, and sustainability assessment. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Stamatia. Our next speaker is Hindal Helou, a higher education professional and political scientist whose work sits at the intersection of international relations, gender policy, and higher education development. She currently serves as a senior officer at the Academic Advising Center at the American University in Cairo. Prior to this role, she managed the Tomorrow's Leaders Gender Scholars Program at AUC, a U.S. Department of State funded program that promotes leadership and gender-related research. In this capacity, she played a central role in advancing gender mainstreaming efforts within the university. Her work included developing gender-focused training for students and coordinating workshops for academic and administrative staff on integrating gender perspectives into teaching and reporting practices and contributing to institutional policy reform. So, Hind, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the generous introduction and for having me here today. Over the next 20 minutes, I'd like to talk about how Africa's energy transition cannot be properly understood or designed without a feminist political economy framework. This means that social reproduction needs to be attended to, the distribution of unpaid care labor. We need to attend to the justice in policy design and to who actually is included in the green economy and what is being built. Okay. So published reports show us that Africa's energy transition is often explained purely in terms of gigawatts, investment flows, and emission reduction rates. But this presentation asks a few questions. First, who benefits from green transition, as in whose needs are named in policy design? Since feminist energy justice scholarship shows us that distributive goals are more power produced and always leave out goals where women's different energy needs are actually specified. And two, who gets to work and on what terms? Are the new jobs possible and accessible for women? Or does the transition basically reproduce the same occupational segregation as fossil fuel economy? And three, who is left outside the market of that transition? As in, what would a transition informed by feminist political economy actually look like? And when it is a structural design principle, not just a simple add-on. Right, so three traditions inform my analysis. First, social reproduction theory, which says that capitalist production relies on unpaid productive labor, like collecting fuel, cooking, caring for dependents, and whatnot, all of which are majorly performed by women. And this labor is not external to the energy system, it's a part of it. Second, I have ecofeminist political economy, which explains that the monetized economy floats on an invisible base, which is basically the women's unpaid energy labor. So decarbonization without redistributing care is not transition, and definitely not a just transition. Third, we have feminist energy justice, which gives us three diagnostic dimensions. Basically, to reiterate, who gets access, whose needs are named in the policies, and who participates in the design. Scholars also make an explicit claim. A gender-neutral energy policy basically is a structurally unequal system, not exactly neutral. And it is basically, if it's not neutral, it's basically male. Right, so to Africa's context. In Africa, statistics tell us that there are 600 million people without electricity access, and Africa receives just 3% of global clean energy investment. Feminist political economy tells us that capitalist expansion is structurally driven to leave out the very conditions that sustain it. And these include the unpaid labor and care and reproductive labor that supports the paid economy. So in Africa, energy poverty is a direct materialization of this crisis. And African states and the market deliberately externalize the cost of energy provision onto women's bodies and time. The biomass collection, the domestic fuel management, and care under energy-constrained conditions are not welfare shortcomings. They are actually structural subsidies to the market economy and are provided for free by women. So even though Africa's installed energy capacity doubled from 34 to 72 gigawatts between 2014 and 2023, and you can see that wind and solar energy grew from less than 1% to 6% of this power mix. A study that was published in Agenda in 2023, which applies a feminist political economy lens to the South African Northern Cape energy transition, found that renewable energy development creates a gender division of labor where skilled technical roles flow to men, while women are concentrated in the lower paid, less structural service positions. And this transition can reproduce instead of disrupt existing gender hierarchies if it is left undesigned And this finding is, or should serve as a warning for the whole continent. In addition, women represent just 32% of the global renewable energy workforce, and in sub-Saharan Africa, only 25% hold leadership or management roles, with only 13% of women in the sector hold STEM positions. So, having said that, this is simply not a pipeline problem, it is a design problem. So the green economy is being built with the same gendered assumptions as the fossil fuel economy is. Right, so some key barriers that Africa faces. First, when it comes to financial barriers, reports tell us that Africa basically needs 200 billion or even more dollars per year in energy investment. And women-owned small and medium enterprises faced a 42 billion financing gap, which is made worse by certain conditions such as collateral requirements, inheritance laws, and these restrict land ownerships. For example, also the Middle East and North Africa feminist movement is very clear in its critique. They say that the International Monetary Fund's gender strategy treats women as untapped economic resource instead of a rights holder. So this means that gender equality is an instrument of growth rather than a commitment to justice. Secondly, when it comes to policy, we have now established that gender neutral is not a neutral position, but a structural choice that defaults to the needs of those who are already inside the system. Also, the African national climate commitments that are submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change do not specifically highlight gender as a cross-cutting energy priority. In addition to the fact that only a minority of governments or states collect sex disaggregated energy data. So what this tells us is if we cannot measure the gap, it is impossible to close it. Thirdly, when it comes to infrastructure, the barrier runs a little bit deeper than transmission losses. There's grid-first planning, which is a policy choice that systematically disadvantages women-headed rural households, which are majorly off the grid. So the different needs of women-led homes are not even visible to those that are planning working within the grid expansion. And finally, women bear approximately 90% of indoor air pollution mortality, and this cannot be treated as a welfare gap waiting for a charity solution. It is a structural problem that energy economy needs to handle. So Egypt in focus, and why do I choose Egypt? Firstly, it has the continent's second largest renewable energy capacity holder, and it has genuine world-class endowment in solar, wind, and green hydrogen. So the case of Egypt is not a case of resource scarcity. The contradictions that we see between the endowment and the current reality is pretty huge. 89% of generation is still fossil fuel based. So the gap is basically structural rather than technical. And thirdly, Egypt has every gender inequality aspect that Africa has, all disaggregated in the same country. So, and these aspects are measurable. For example, an 18% female labor force participation rate, a 7-to-1 unpaid care ratio, definitely no sex disaggregated energy employment data, and energy policies are not do not have gender metrics. So feminist political economy poses a question here to Egypt, and it is very clear. Basically, can energy transitions designed within these existing and institutional practices transform the gender inequalities, or is it going to just reproduce them again? So when we look at energy's profile, the energy profile in Egypt, some baseline is structured here. So Egypt's power sector is dominated, as we said, by fossil fuels, despite the 59 gigawatts of installed capacity and the rapidly growing renewable pipeline. The power sector emissions have grown 3.5 times in 2 decades. The feminist political economy theory here draws on the concept of depletion costs, as in when women's unpaid labor subsidizes a resource extractive economy, the state is basically then avoiding the pricing of the full social cost of energy provision. So basically, Egypt's fossil fuel subsidies are not just a market distortion. From a feminist political economy perspective, they are a tool for offloading reproductive energy and offloading this reproductive energy onto women while keeping their labor invisible in the policy design. So the gender baseline for female labor force participation in Egypt is at 18% against 73% for men. So you see, gendered exclusion from formal labor is co-produced with exclusion from energy decision-making, right? So women are basically outside both markets and for structural reasons. Egypt is currently ranked at 140 out of 146 countries on the World Economic Forum Economic Empowerment Index in 2024. So it is safe to say that a green transition that does not address this baseline will unfortunately not be able to change it. Now, I've chosen some major projects, and please allow me to audit them from a gender perspective. As you can see here, the pipeline is pretty impressive. For example, Ben Solar Park employed approximately 4,000 workers, just huge, but the women's share of technical roles has not been publicly disclosed. Another example is the West Suhag 10 gigawatt wind farm, which did not publish a gender impact assessment as part of its environmental impact assessment. Now, the Gulf of Suez wind project also has not published a gender impact assessment and definitely does not disaggregate its hiring data by sex. And finally, the South Sinai Green Hydrogen Facility does not have a published workforce plan either. So across the 4 projects and other projects, of course, the pattern is pretty consistent, right? So where dedicated gender programming exists, then gender accountability would follow. And where neither of those exists, then the default is male. And that is, again, a design choice, not an inherent policy. Excuse me. So the specific challenges that Egypt is facing. So in a nutshell, there are various challenges, namely 6, but 3 of which I want to shed a theoretical light on. So when it comes to care burden, the United Nations Women in Egypt documents that married women in Egypt spend 7 times more hours on unpaid care than married men. So the female labor force participation is at 18%. And this is not a coincidence, right? So energy transition jobs remain structurally inaccessible when social reproduction is not redistributed alongside the market transformation. As for fossil fuels lock-in, the subsidy structure is not a fiscal problem. The approximately $7 billion in annual subsidies keep the domestic energy prices low precisely by making women's reproductive energy labor invisible to the pricing mechanism. So the true cost of the energy economy includes women's time and health, which are priced at 0 at the moment. On the gender data gap, Egypt does not publish sex disaggregated energy employment statistics. And this absence of recognition data is a failure in energy justice because, simply put, you cannot close a gap if you cannot measure it. Positively speaking, perhaps there are 4 opportunities that present themselves. The energy export hub requires financing, and procedural justice dimension is the leverage here. So design interconnectors and grid financing agreements should require gender procurement benchmarks and women in infrastructure governance. The green hydrogen manufacturing opportunity, as in factory jobs with inclusive skills, should represent a structural entry into the formal industrial labor for women. The off-grid and clean cooking scale-up means sustaining the livelihoods is the precondition for any just ecological transition. And on gender-responsive climate finance, so the Middle East and North Africa feminist movement, again, is very clear. It demands that feminist demands should go beyond gender tagging, as in towards a finance that is not that does not create debt, and it should be locally led and definitely rights-based instead of efficiency-based. So to synthesize a little bit the theoretical framework and the practical aspects, so across the feminist political economy frameworks, we have the gross domestic and product visible green transition floats on an invisible base of women's unpaid labor. Making this base visible in the first act is the first act of justice transition in policy. Definitely, clean cooking is materialist in the best sense, as in the kitchen is where the capital's appropriation of women labor is most direct. So when we know that about 1.1 million deaths per year happen because of household air pollution in sub-Saharan Africa, then this is not a peripheral statistic, it should be a central one. Now, new green jobs will reproduce existing exclusion unless off-grid energy provision, childcare access, and care redistribution policy are designed simultaneously with the market transformation. And finally, consistently, evidence shows that women reinvest about 90% of income into their households and communities against roughly 40% of men. And scholars like Batliwala and Reddy call this the virtuous cycle. The virtuous cycle is the most powerful economic argument one can present for inclusive energy transition in the design. In conclusion, I leave with a few suggestions. So, feminist political economy provides the diagnostic, and a gender-neutral energy transition is a structurally unequal system. It will reproduce inequality. Feminist international political economy is present in every power purchase agreement that does not mention women. The closing picture I want to leave you with is that the green economy we are building is floating on something, and that something is women's unpaid labor. The question is whether the transition will make that visible or redistributed, or whether it will make simply float a new set of markets on the same invisible foundation. The practical steps and those that are doable in the case of Egypt definitely have sex disaggregated energy data, the gender criteria in power purchase agreements, clean cooking investment treated with the same seriousness as grid investment, and women in technical roles as a policy default, not an exception. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hin, for your research and your presentation. Next, we'll continue with another perspective from Africa by Lisa Kituto. Lisa is a Kenyan biomedical engineering student at the Technical University of Mombasa. She is also the chairperson of IAE Women in Engineering TUM chapter and is very passionate about SDG 5, which advocates for gender equality. Lisa thrives in actively being involved in creating awareness for women in spaces where their voices are not heard, from the field of engineering all through green energy, among many others. She is highly motivated and believes in the success of those impacted. Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'd also like to thank you for recognizing the ability to involve me in this. I'd like to share my screen. So I'll start off with the title of my presentation. I'm talking about green transition and gender, specifically about transition, bottlenecks, and the situation in Africa. So I'll start with the introduction. So Africa's green transition is an environmental, social, and economic priority, though earlier on they were based more on the social and the environmental part without looking into the economic priority. And then this is where the gender comes in, because as long as there's a problem with gender bias, then the economy has to be affected in one way or another. So the continent is moving towards climate resilience, sustainable energy, and low carbon development. But still, women remain underrepresented in these discussions, and that is why we are greatly affected, because as long as there's no equality, it brings about difficulty in trying to navigate about how to go about things and how things are actually dealt with seriously. So the transition itself shows that the world is shifting from the fossil fuels to renewable energy systems for sustainable development. But it has been discovered that Africa's economic growth is relatively higher than the global average. To be very precise, Africa has showcased a 4% GDP compared to the global 2.6 GDP. But here comes the difficulties, because as much as the global average is higher, there's a lot of fragile and unstable benefits. So the unevenness causes results or reflects broader issues of inequality, including gender inequality and lack of inclusivity. Then women are being disproportionately affected when growth distribution is unequal. Then their underrepresentation in the green energy transition worsens the situation, as their perspectives and contributions are often overlooked. So regardless of having a higher GDP than the global average, there's a lot of fragile situations, and all of these are being caused by gender inequality, because there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of bias, there's a lot of segregation of women in these opportunities, because women are thought to be better off in other fields as compared to the growing fields, or probably in STEM careers and the likes. So the current observations we have are that while addressing this transition, there are a few notable characteristics leaning towards integrating women to the green transition economy. First off, we have policy frameworks. There are some spaces that have made it available for women to be involved, but their input and implementations remains almost insignificant. So in most cases, you'll find that, for example, in Kenya, there's a rule that says 2/3 of the total population that probably is being offered an opportunity, or even preferably in leadership, 1/3 of them should be women. So they only put that rule so that women can be seen as part of the larger group. But in real sense, the women who are being placed in such positions are probably being given lower positions, or they're being given positions that are stereotypical towards their beliefs, or rather they're being given positions just to be seen as being involved, not because their input is being considered or the implementation, because most of the time some of them are put there insignificantly just for the public, just to be seen, but their relevance is not highly experienced. And then we proceed to the education and the skill set. Women programs are increasingly being offered in preparation to admit them to the field of green energy. So there's a lot of women empowerment going on. There's a lot of women programs. There's a lot of women trying to empower each other and show up for one another in various programs, whether social, economic, or even academic. And in this case now, referring to green energy, there's also very many opportunities that are being increasingly offered to women to show up in green energy. And then the professional initiatives. Women for Green Jobs is an internationally organized initiative that ensures more women are accessing and succeeding in clean energy careers in Africa, targeting job placements and offering career support. Apart from W4RES, which is also Women for Green Jobs, there's also another one called Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, GEAPP, which also is an internationally organized initiative that includes women in Africa and involves them in the clean energy and also the green transition. But there's also one problem, because as much as the internationally based, it becomes difficult to access the entire sub-Saharan Africa, probably due to logistics or the size, because it's becoming a bit difficult for them to access the entire sub-Saharan Africa. So next, I'll proceed to the bottlenecks. That's after looking at the transitions and also the observations made. So historically, employees in the African clean energy have predominantly been male, but this is changing. So these organizations like the one I've just mentioned, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, which is supporting women into transitioning to green careers and also offering skill sets to such women. So the challenges are the disparities that women are being underrepresented in technical and leadership roles. Like, for example, when they talk about 2/3 and a third, that does not give equal opportunity. It means as much as women are being involved, they still have less of an advantage, and they're probably being given a less fraction in representation. Then there's also access to finance. Securing funds has become a very huge challenge by female entrepreneurs because some financial institutions have systemic biases. You'll find that there are institutions which do not believe in women being able to handle financial issues. So probably the men are the one being given the organizations are more biased to financial institutions or financial issues being dealt with men other than women. So it's becoming a little difficult, for example, for those women who have startups or they want to probably start a drive that has anything to do with green energy. Every time they apply for funds, they probably get rejected, or someone of a different gender is preferably picked over them. And then there's cultural and systemic norms. Persistent gender roles restrict women's participation in STEM and green technology adoption. It's very unfortunate that even in this time and age, there's still a lot of cultural and systemic norms and probably even stereotypes that address women, that probably stating that women are not supposed to be found in STEM careers, or women are supposed to be preferably in other fields, just not what you could regard as a male-dominated sector. So the fact that there's a lot of cultural and systemic norms, even if the women try to show up in those spaces where probably science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is required, they're probably looked down upon or seen less of a person and also seen incapable of the role that they have been given. And also, to finalize the bottlenecks, there's the care economy burden, that women's disproportionate responsibility for unpaid care reduces the ability to engage fully in green transition. So you'll find even in cases where women are being required to care for their families or even their children, or even in the case of pregnancy, for example, probably there have been many cases where some people have taken their maternity leave, and when they came back to work, or probably something of the sort, they were probably given a lower role, or they were actually unemployed just because of what they had to do. And this also involves the care economy, because as a woman, they also have families, they also have other responsibilities to attend to, but that is also being seen as an obstacle. So as long as they branded a woman and all of that, it also gives her less of opportunities, just because they know at some point she might not be as required as they would like her to be. Then proceed to the current landscape, what we're experiencing right now in regards to gender and green energy. So there's emerging opportunities from the two organizations I've given, that clean energy companies have started recruiting female workforce. And then regional variation, Now, this is where the problem also comes in, even when it comes to the accessibility of the companies to the sub-Saharan Africa. So you find that countries like South Africa and Kenya have shown stronger institutional support compared to fragile states. It's not everywhere in Africa that institutions are actually supporting the growth of women, especially in the fragile states. They're probably denied, or they do not even get access to the information that women are required in such and such activities. We also have professional momentum, where internationally recognized alliances are funding gender-focused initiatives. So as long as you've given, or you've pitched an idea, or you've given a solution to a particular problem that also involves gender, there's also alliances that are promoting the same, and they're definitely funding the gender-focused initiatives to help out women and young girls to overcome their challenges and get to where they would like to be. Finally, we have the academic discourse. This involves the provision of research opportunities for women in the field. There's a lot of scholarships being given. I know of a program called, there's very many programs actually, even some that support STEM and other activities that are women. They're more centered on women so that they can at least uplift the women who have probably lower literacy levels, or they do not have research opportunities, or probably have been denied research opportunities earlier on, just to uplift them and take them to the next level. So I have identified a few women entrepreneurs, preferably in the green energy space, that have been identified in Africa. We have, the first one is Solar Sisters. This one is a non-profit organization which recruits and trains women and also supplies them with durable solar-powered products, leading to development of green energy businesses in the rural African areas. This one has been identified and has been implemented also in Tanzania, Uganda, and Nigeria, especially in the rural areas, in the rural African areas where it's very difficult to access solar-powered products. I proceed to the Solar Mamas. This is a woman-led business that installs solar panels in rural coastal communities in sub-Saharan Africa, including Tanzania, where there's less than 4% of the population has access to the electricity grid. That's actually not very good of a situation, because less than 4% of an entire population of what you consider a republic is literally less than it's not a very good statistic if you consider. So in the UN, women have also been of great support to this initiative and extended it to Liberia, having electrified over 425 homes. This was in 2017. And then this is where the best part comes in, is that every trained woman in that organization has been found to at least electrify about 50 homes rather, in her hometown. So as much as they're training women and they're gaining personnel for these jobs, this also improves and also accelerates the rate of the rest of the population being in the electricity grid, because as much as only one person is being trained, she's able to at least get 50 more of the thing. There's one called eCover, and there's Pinekazi as well. I'll start with the Pinekazi first. So it's a woman-led business in Kenya which uses pineapple waste. I think that's very creative, because most of us are fond of throwing away this type of waste, but they use this to harvest and make eco-friendly shoes, and they collect the waste managers with product designers to use pineapple leaf waste as clothing materials, and they also create green jobs for unemployed youth. So they've also won in the African Development Bank's Fashionomics Africa initiative. So as much as they're creating employment, they're also creating eco-friendly material, means that they're making good use of waste, meaning that they're not putting out waste from whatever they are producing. Finally, the e-cover is a company based in Senegal and it has women in it. They recycle used tires and rubber aggregates and they use them in the expansion of businesses, both small, micro and also medium enterprises in West Africa. So here are a few recommendations to get women ready for the green economy. The first is addressing the gender segregation in education and promoting women's participation in STEM. There's also reskilling and upskilling. Reskilling comes in when you need to remind the people of exactly what they're doing so that where they're falling back, they may be up to speed. There's also developing women's networks in male-dominated sectors. This can also be in the form of this webinar, for example, because this is meant to develop women's networks to such areas or such fields. And then supporting the transition towards the formal economy so that it is made known even in professions and even in whatever is going on currently that women are actually readily available for these roles. To accelerate action, we leverage green economy instruments for women's employment. We also, by leveraging means that you influence them to actually realize that green economy instruments should be there for women's employment. There's also the prioritizing of women's access to green finance. We talked about the financial issues and also addressing the gender biases in the green finance architecture. This one is mostly based on the finance problems and women's difficulty in being able to access funds. Also formalize the care economy by adopting the 5R framework. 5R framework involves recognizing, reducing, redistributing, rewarding, and representing. So instead of condemning women for caring for what they have to take care of, you at least recognize their efforts. You reduce workload where it is required. You can also redistribute the same workload to those who are available. Reward them where they have done well or where credit is due, and also represent the same women where they are required. Finally, is the STEM incentives to implement boys in HEAL and girls in STEM. So in Africa, there's a very huge problem when people think that boys are the ones who belong in STEM and girls are the ones who belong in HEAL. HEAL in this case is health, education, administration, and literacy. So as long as we strike a balance between the two, that boys can also be found in health, education, administration, and literacy, and that girls can also be found in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, then that means that there will be no ongoing stereotypes because every child is believed to be able to fit in whatever field whatsoever, and it has nothing to do with their gender. Thank you so much for listening to me. That marks the end of my presentation. And in case you want to reach out, then there we go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for this insightful presentation. Finally, we'll hear from Ioannis Konstas, who will present best practices and tools from the W4RES Project. Ioannis holds degrees in social sciences and politics, as well as a master's in international relations. He has a track record with over 20 years of experience as a project manager and coordinator of research, education, international cooperation initiatives and projects. His experience includes project management, dissemination, exploitation, education research projects like W4RES, BigCoop, Alpha, FUELPHORIA, Inspiring Agrisol, design and development of postgraduate programs, gender mainstreaming, education and research quality assurance, as well as international capacity building activities and support to policy development, international cooperation, and stakeholders engagement. Prior to joining UPlan, Ioannis worked for the International Hellenic University, initially as a program manager for the School of Science Technology, and then as a head of education administration. He also served as the coordinator of the IN Academy initiative of a leading research institute for ICT, participating in and managing numerous studies, dissemination, networking, and training activities. He is currently the coordinator for the AgriSol project that aims to promote the adoption of agri-PV systems in the agriculture. So Yannis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vasya. I didn't expect that you would read all my resume. That makes me feel really, really old. But in any case, this is a great day for me in the sense that I have the opportunity to present once more the results of W4S, one of the projects that have been very close to my heart for day one, and actually one of the projects I think had also a personal impact. Being a son, a husband, a father, and hopefully one day of a grandfather of various females that had defined my life, I saw W4S as a great opportunity to be part of the solution rather than being the part of the problem. W4S was a project that aimed to tap on the potential of women to increase the market uptake of renewables in the heating and cooling sector. But that's upon a series of other sectors, definitely the renewable energy sector, definitely the energy sector, definitely a lot of aspects of our lives and of our economies. So today, what I will try to do is to give you a few things that are still useful, and I think there are a lot of things that are still useful, and I'll try to leave out the things that were already presented. This is the outline of my presentation, presenting what W4S was about. I will go through to the best practices. Most probably, I will avoid the things that were repeated, just saying a few comments here and there. Be more specific and practical in terms of what we should do at various levels, at the organizational level, at the cultural level, and at the very narrow level of, not narrow, but anyway, less wide than the previous one of Horizon Europe projects. Stay upon a gender-sensitive communication example to highlight a few of the mistakes we do intentionally or unintentionally, I don't know, but there are things that we can actually change on our everyday lives, and then provide you the links to the W4S Observatory that is full with material that can be practical to help organizations to overcome, not just in the RES sector, not just projects, but I think a wider sector, simple tools that can make a real change. And also, I would say some of our personal perspectives after the thoughts after W4S, and after discussing and talking for a long period of time. I think W4S has also been a very impactful project for my organization, Plan, a consulting company in Greece, in Thessaloniki, Greece, that has been very active in innovation projects for more than 2 decades. I can tell you today that now the majority of consultants and project managers are female, and we have, at least at the level of, let's say, head of sectors, there is gender parity, which is very, very interesting because in the last 6 years that more or less this happened, the productivity of the company, the results, the projects that we got funded tripled. So there is a clear correlation there that once you bringing more people in from both sexes, this has an actual impact on your results. And I think we are more or less an example of that. So W4S was tapping on the potential of women in renewable heating and cooling markets. 12 project partners from the north of Europe to the south, and a very interesting consortium with various organizations that had complementary abilities. Anyway, these are boring stuff, but let's go a bit to what W4S did a series of studies, established networks in our countries to understand what was happening in the ground on the ground in terms of the renewables heating and cooling market, and what was happening in relation actually with women. Were they part of the ecosystem? What was their role? What things was working well? What did not work well? Then we take all this information and we created a set of series of support measures, business support, technical capacity building, and raising awareness to tackle exactly all these issues that essentially did not allow um, women to provide their potential in the renewables and in particular in the urban heating and cooling market. And the last part is to provide a set of tools that can be reused, guidelines in terms allowing people and organizations to replicate and inform policies at the EU level and at our national level. Now, I don't know what I can add after the EC of the policy officer. Yes, gender equality is a key priority in EU research and education, and it has been promoted actively. The details were presented earlier on. Also, the need to distinguish between sex and gender is very important. I would just underline something that is absolutely necessary to have in mind. Gender is socially constructed, meaning that this can change. On occasion, we hear people claiming that we cannot change men and women. This is by nature. They are what they are. Well, actually, if we go back to history, we have patriarchal societies, we have matriarchal societies, and power relations were quite different. This is quite evident that we can make a change in that. Gender roles are not necessarily frozen in time. And we know they have varied among cultures and time, and the resulting social inequalities and power relations can actually change. It's not something written in stone, it's something that we do every single day. And we can change this, and this have to have in mind. And because this is creates a series of problems. A series of problems have to do with access to education, jobs, opportunities, the opportunity to be part of making decisions, the opportunity to get resources, to get benefits and responsibilities. And even though this might sound a bit strange, what I'm going to just say, this is really a huge injustice. Mainly for women, of course, but also for men. Because men that are set, and this is what I really liked in Lisa's presentation, they have to serve a certain stereotype. They are strong, they take decisions, they will be in roles that are stressful. And I am of the opinion that a lot of my colleagues don't really want that. And imposing stereotypes makes them follow roles they don't really want, and they're not quite often good at them. And at the same time, these kind of stereotypes do not allow to women to have these roles, which they have the skills, they have the capacities, they have the will to do them, and we put them to the side. This is absolutely crazy. And it's a matter of fairness for both sexes, and also it's a matter of efficiency. Because if you get people to do what they really want and what they are really good at, and they have on their own as humans have they have the courage, the will, the preference to do it, you're going to get better results. And this is absolutely necessary to realize. But I will come back to that later on. In relation to energy, already these were covered in the sense that women and men have different relations with energy systems, both as consumers, as producers, or part of the decision-making process, and different patterns of use. We have seen in one of the studies of W4RES that women tend to be more environmentally aware, and they tend to prefer more friendly choices. This is very, very interesting. That means that there can be a clear correlation if we increase the number or have gender parity in decision-making processes. The criteria that will be used will be far more environmentally friendly and even for in terms of the climate change. Now, we also found there are quite important different perceptions among the countries in the world. They think about the role of women and men. Not strange enough, male respondents overestimate the issue of female participation. And this is quite important and leads us to another conclusion that is very interesting, that gender issues, gender mainstreaming, gender equality is not a women's only topic. It's not today. We do not need just women among themselves discussing about the problems or discussing about the stereotypes. We also need men to know about these issues, to get informed, to realize their mistakes, to share the burden of changing the situation, to understand that the statistics do not back the old ways of doing business, the old ways of organizing our societies. And we saw at the surveys in all over Europe that this is quite clear. They don't really understand that there is an issue. They think everything is fair. Of course, one might say that this is something that suits them in the sense that they get the better roles. But again, reality has to come in order to understand the reality, gender issues should be something to attract the interest of women and men equally. And I dare say on a personal basis, men should be much more involved in this if we want to accelerate the pace of change. More or less, yes. I won't go into this part. I would just say that despite the fact that we have progress, we have important gaps, and this is what came up in W4RES survey about the situation in various European countries, is that there are gaps remaining in workforce participation, access to resources, and there are significant salary differences, participation gaps, and representation in leadership positions. Thus, there is progress, but this progress is not good enough. We know that 32% of women are part of the renewable energy workforce, which is a bit better than, and this data is quite recently from IRENA in 2025, compared with the 22%, renewables are in a better situation. However, we are a long way from where we should want to go. And the numbers are a bit, let's say, create a hallucination. The situation is worse in positions of leadership. So what to do? What is the things that we should take into consideration? What is the basic thing? I will repeat what the previous speakers have already said. We need to use and to apply disaggregated data. This actually reveals the problem. If we don't apply this approach, we will never know what's happening. If we don't ask the question, we will never get the answer. Analyze the different impacts of women and men, and this should be integrated in all our innovation research activities. Promote gender balanced participation and integrate this gender dimension in all aspects of research and innovation. And I will go through my next slides to a bit from the generic to the more specific, the things that we need to take into account and we need definitely to tackle. The first thing is awareness value. I mean, there is the realization of the problem, the realization of the data that we have, of the issues that are raised, should be known to everyone. and both women and men. Access to STEM for females is absolutely necessary even at the school level, even at the early stages of education. Saying that we want to bring in more technicians, more engineers that are female, if we don't actively encourage women to take up, young girls take up this kind of careers, we won't have the trained people to do that. And we know from experience now in most European countries that once the percentage of females following STEM increases, with a slight delay, we get more females in positions of power and in the technical positions and decision-making positions. Now, is this enough? No. We need even more than that. We need targets that have to do with working conditions, making working environments friendly for women. This is not a boys-only club. The working environment should respect and should be safe for everybody, and especially for women. And we need to set quotas at least for a period once we provide opportunities. We have seen in a series of sectors, once you introduce quota, in a matter of time, the opportunities that are created give the space to women to come forward and pose their presence. The empowerment that these kind of success stories bring into the fore further accelerates the process, further accelerates the fairness of our societies, further enhances the efficiency of our economy. Slight things are, well, we need data and expertise on gender. We have to focus on that, and we have to take into account also slight things like just gender-sensitive communication. I will end with an example of that. It's are really simple things that people with empathy, people with good sense, would try to monitor themselves in order to gradually and as soon as possible eradicate such stereotypes, such approaches. So, I already said, let's go to the cultural changes that we need, raise awareness about the existence of real gender inequalities and barriers. This is not imaginary, this is real, this is factual, and this is quite problematic as we change at all levels. Provide training on gender mainstreaming, how to do it, address gender bias, reduce gender stereotypes. And this is at the society level, cultural level, but these are very important things, and challenge traditional gender roles. Lisa and previous speaker also talk about the care economy. Care economy essentially is within the family. That takes into consideration when a couple have kids. This is something for women's only issue. This is absolutely crazy. This is not the case. This cannot be the case, and it's absolutely an injustice for women, because they are overburdened with this, do not allow to complete their role in their lives, their potential, and at the same time, I can say, being a father, men do not get the opportunity to care. They're not. I'm not saying they're not. They're not having the quality time they should have with their kids. What's the point of having a family if you just you don't distribute both responsibilities and benefits equally? It's crazy. And I think on that respect, as we move forward and we see that this kind of traditional gender roles within the family are broken down, we have better balance, happier people, and what is most important, I think we are the potential to raise kids with empathy, with respect, with solidarity, better people, better citizens. And this is a change. If you want to change the world, change yourself and groom your children to be better persons. At the organizational level, yes, we need additional tools and solutions, measures. Give forward leadership roles to women and empower them by teaching them how to do it. Conduct an analysis in your institutions to see, do you have any women in leadership positions? And try actively to make sure that there are the opportunities there, and you take in people, you recruit people at the gender parity so you can have the candidates to move forward. Make sure that you have safe working environments. You don't need boys' clubs that don't leave space for women. You provide working environments that are respectable for women or in the various aspects. Set quotas. They work. Simple as that. Ensure equal pay, transparent payment policies. Same kind of work, same kind of pay. Very simple, common sense things. Get people that are trained or are related with gender expertise and integrate gender consideration to any kind of project planning early on. This cannot be, should not be an afterthought. Now, do's and don'ts in Horizon projects. Make sure that you integrate the gender dimension for sure. I already mentioned, and everybody mentioned, check this aggregated data and promote gender balanced governance. And I'll tell you a bit of the don'ts. Once you start the design, include this aspect, the gender aspect, early on at the proposal level. Who will be part of the team? What activities? What things that we should take into consideration? This cannot happen as an afterthought. Avoid tokenistic inclusion. What is tokenistic inclusion? Okay, let's put a few names of a few females and we're fine. No, you need females with an actual role within the project, within the proposal planning, within all the activities, both as receivers, both as givers at the same time, because you need the female perspective. It's absolutely, the diversity works. Gives you perspective, gives you more information. If you don't include the gender, let's say, parameter in your research, in your decision making, then you're avoiding 50% of human population. This is very silly to do. Understand that there are gender structural barriers and don't ignore them. Take positive affirmative action in order to overcome them. And we went to what is gender sensitive communication. You can see something from a world that I hope that is receding gradually. This is an example of what to do wrong. You have a picture of technicians, only men, strong, willful. You are asking people to join an energy community that is strong, and then you correlate strength with a male. And even on the level of the problem, you think a hashtag is fight man-made climate change. Because I suppose the writer of this phrase do not believe that women can cause climate change as well. They're not most probably in his eyes strong enough to do that. Let's see to this comparison side by side of one over the other. On top, you see the stereotypical imagery of only one gender used. And on the bottom, you see visual language, visual identities that essentially promote diversity, people, both female and male, together, that have equally or roles of importance, strength, and the rest. Let's go back to my last slide. This is how we can do it. You have both female and male. You have all the community, representing the community that you are trying to attract, and you are bringing for the problem, fight human-induced climate change. We are all responsible for what we're doing or not doing fast enough. And if you start thinking like that, to try to be inclusive, to try to bring in the gender dimension in all sorts of activities in your life and in the projects. We are setting up an advisory board. Have in mind the gender parity. Okay, I need 2 engineers that know about, I don't know, chemical engineers. I'll bring a female, I'll bring a male. I need to get the perspective of the recipient, right? For example, agricultural farmers. Yes, I need a female, I need a male. The perspectives are quite different. And it's equally important to understand that there is an intersectionality that should be taken into account in all kind of activities, taking into consideration the role of gender. Well, I think I won't go into this path. I'll just tell you, in my eyes and in the eyes and the experience we had in W4RES discussing all the colleagues, it's the afterthought. So what we thought, well, it's not just a matter of fairness. Promoting gender equality is not an issue that deals only with social justice. It's not just a matter of human rights. It's the wise thing to do because it will be beneficial for the economies, it will be beneficial for the growth of the GDPs of our countries, it will be beneficial for everyone. It's a sensible thing to do. Either you are a politician, an entrepreneur, a university professor, a dean, bringing in, providing opportunities to women and setting the scene equal for everyone will provide better results that are more efficient, whilst at the same time it's fair. It promotes social justice. It's good for the economy. It's good for our societies. I will say that this is not a women's only issue. That means that men should be equally engaged, trained, communicated, convinced to understand that this is a huge issue and they should be active in changing the situation. And lastly, this will be mutually beneficial for both sexes because it will allow a better allocation of roles that is matching the needs of each and every person. If we disqualify in terms of the gender, what kind of career paths, what kind of roles within society are restricted to that kind or to the other, to one sex or to the other sex, this is ridiculous. More freedom, more equality of opportunity will bring happier people. And happiness is not only measured in terms of money, it don't only measured in terms of power, more than enough is measured in terms of simply enjoying life the way that you actually want. And this is my final argument. You can see here the links where you find the various gender tools, replication guide, the policy recommendation, tools for gender mainstreaming, gender audit, gender equality plans, and all the rest. I hope I didn't speak too much. Thank you for your attention and your patience.
Thank you very much, Ioannis, and thank you to all our speakers for these insightful presentations. I would now be happy to take any questions or comments from the audience. You may type them in the chat. We have some already. We had one from Irma Korten to consider what if social environmental impact is outside the scope of system boundaries? of a product or a service, which would happen, for example, in case of scarce, sustainable sourced raw materials like wood. I think this mainly to Stamatia for the social LCA methodology.
Okay, thank you for the question. So, if relevant social or environmental impacts occur outside the defined system boundaries, this should be clearly acknowledged as a limitation of the assessment. In case such as scarce woody raw materials, where important impacts occurs upstream in the forestry and resource extraction, this should at least be discussed qualitative or addressed through additionally and complementary analysis where the relevant the system boundaries can also be expanded to better capture those impacts. Thank you.
Thank you, Stamatia. Would any of the other speakers like to add something to this question, this answer? Okay, then we had another question to Lisa. You mentioned internally recognized alliances founding under focused initiatives. Can you make an example?
On the alliance question, there's an alliance I know of called the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, WEFI, that is also in partnership with the global. It has a global partnership with a bank known as African Development Bank, and in this case, they give out financial opportunities to women who are into the green energy space or probably working on something to do with climate. In this case, they don't have any bias towards the women implemented projects. And so the fact that they are also in partnership with the bank, the African Development Bank, also makes it more easier for anyone to access it from any part of the continent. I hope that answers my question.
Thank you. Then we have two questions for Jade. The first one is, can you make an example of a EU-funded project working in fields that are characterized by gender inequality, which successfully address the gender dimension?
Thank you for the question. Yes, so there is several projects that work on gender and intersectional research. So meaning that they have direct objective, for example, to contribute to gender equality. So for example, under cluster 2, Destination 1, we have project that actually echoes a lot what was mentioned just in the presentation before by Ioannis, this idea to really focus more on men and to understand better also like new behavior on social media, for example, and masculinities. So we have, like, for example, a project that is focusing on youth that is called You Dare. We have also other projects that rather are funded under, for example, cluster 6, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, cluster 6, that, for example, there were one called grass sailing that was really focusing on how women in rural area are leading in the entrepreneur sphere and how we can also bridge the gap in this area. So that's one of them. And also, maybe to give like a third example, I had like I also know that there is project in cluster 3, so the cluster that is connected to civil security, that, for example, take a look at domestic violence and try to create proper tool to improve security in this area. So it can directly, let's say, contribute to gender equality, but then also you have other projects. So for example, in health, that don't contribute directly, but still like integrate a strong element. And for example, it's the case for a call that we had that was aiming at addressing the access to care to care, to the access to healthcare for person in vulnerable situation. And so we had also like this integration in the frame of that. We also like have projects that are directly contributing to strengthen gender equality in research and innovation. And those projects, they are funded more under WIDERA part of Horizon Europe. And please do not hesitate to ask me if you have question and if you're not familiar with Horizon Europe. But under WIDERA, for example, we have project that works on implementing gender equality plans in the universities or in the research organization or in the private sector. We have also project that, for example, I was following a project that recently ended, that is the GIL project, and really work on how to make gender sensitive innovation. So that's just to name few of them. But if you wish to have more information about our work, in the last section of my slides, there is a lot of links, and you can always also reach out to us, and we always place to put and to point to you like couple projects.
Thank you, Jade. And the second question from Mr. Chipuridis. I am sure you're aware of the gender quota tool. Has it been considered as a tool to increase gender balance?
So I see it with quotation marks. So I don't know if it's just a reference to quota in general or if it's like a specific tool developed under potentially a specific project. If it's the case, I am not aware, but if we are just talking about quota, in Horizon Europe, we don't have, we have rather targets. So we target gender balance, meaning 40-60%. So it's a tool that we are using, as I was showing in my presentation, at different levels. So meaning like we are using it as, for example, for the agencies as contracting authority for evaluator of proposals. So we recruit researchers to assess proposals, and in this frame we have a gender balance objective that we ensure, in the sense that now we can see that women expert evaluator and evaluation proposal are 45%, and it used to be 42% in Horizon 2020. So there always been like a great effort towards that. And now, as I was saying, our way to also push and really show that it's a part of the excellence of a project is to assess it under a criteria connected to, if there is an ex aequo situation, then the gender balance will enter in the ranking criterion. I also want to say that we are aiming for those targets because we are well aware that there is a leaky pipeline, and that also in some sectors, unfortunately, women are not always greatly represented. So we are also aiming to set objectives that are achievable and trying to assist directly institution and the member state in reaching this objective, and in having more women in the pool of talent, but also having more women that retain in research innovation. And I don't know, Vasya, if you want to read the next question, or tell me if you want me to read it, you let me know.
Yeah, and the final one to Jade and Stamatia. For projects like FUELPHORIA, what would you suggest as the best approach to improving gender balance within the consortium? Should the focus be mainly on internal awareness and education, or could more structured approaches also help? Like, for example, encouraging partners to include more women in key roles, or to aim for both male and female representatives during project meetings?
So yeah, thank you also for this question. I think what is being done, so on our side at the Commission, we are like offering a lot of guidance regarding the gender equality plans, and we really see gender equality plans in one research organization or in one structure, let's say, to speak more largely, as what needs to be the guidance for this institution to show its commitment. So in that, we are suggesting also a lot of materials to try to guide better institution in understanding what could work for them. You also have, like, more recently, we publish, thanks to the use of a service called Horizon Booster, we have published like a publication based on our project that work on the implementation of gender equality plans, that is showcasing what are the best practices. And I will definitely recommend to have a look to this publication, because there is a lot of inspiring practices that can definitely help your institution. Also, we have recently we have a prize that is called the EU Award for Gender Equality Champions, and that also reward institutions for their implementation of gender equality plans. So my first advice will be really try to understand what are the best practices and try to really do an assessment and really a gender audit in your organization with everyone on board. So not only the person that are convinced that things need to change, but really everyone. And as it was said before, it needs to be a process that includes people from all gender. So this is really important to really then ensure that you find solutions that are really tailored for your institution to promote better gender equality. I also think that having more women in leadership is also very important for changing the mindset. And this needs to be done, of course, also in the frame maybe of a project. And this can be also a way to inspire and to showcase the contribution. So that I would say there is the need to address gender balance in the project as such, but also really in leadership role. I hope this already answered partly the question, and I'm happy to add some link in the chat.
Thank you so much. Stamatia, would you like to add something?
Yes, thank you again for this meaningful question. I believe for a project like FUELPHORIA, a combination of awareness and more structured practices can be helpful. Awareness and training are important to create an inclusive project culture within the consortium, but structured measures can also support progress. For example, encouraging gender balance representation in project meetings, work packages leadership, or advisor boards can help ensure that women are visible in key technical discussion. Also, another useful approach is to actively encourage partners to nominate women as the task leader or speaker when it's possible. The objective here is not only gender balance in numbers, but also meaningful participation in decision-make process or technical discussion. So this kind of small structural practices can improve gender balance while keeping the focus on expertise and meaningful participation.
Thank you, Stamatia. So I don't see any other questions. And we are already about 10 minutes above our time. So I would like to thank again all of our speakers for their excellent presentations and for sharing their perspectives with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us and followed the discussion. We really appreciate your time and interest. And we hope this webinar has offered useful insights and inspiration on how our projects can better integrate gender perspectives. The green transition will only be successful if it is both innovative and inclusive. Thank you again, and we look forward to continuing this dialogue in future initiatives. We wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.